While everyone is being seated, I have a question. I'm using the word Führer for Adolf Hitler. What does the word Führer mean? It's a German word. Leader. Okay. So we should not just take it for granted that everybody knows that. So thank you for that. All right, now we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're going to start with this. As you're going to notice as we proceed here, the Nazis learned that the Mennonites in Germany were really valuable people. And then, when World War II happened, they went to Russia, and they discovered there's a whole bunch more over there. I don't think that discover's the right word. But they found them there, and since they're so valuable, they wanted to move the whole group of Russian Mennonites over to a certain place in Poland called Warthenland. You see that word that's underlined up there? Warthenland. The Nazis chased the Polish people who lived in Warthenland out so that they could resettle Mennonites there. But then the war got over, and this never happened. Okay, so that's what Warthenland is. And here's the qualification. To go to Warthenland, it restricted membership, it limited membership to those of German nationality, strictly defined in Nazi Germany by blood and Volk, thus excluding Christians of Jewish or Slavic background. So that's the people who were qualified to go there. But this is almost unbelievable. The people who would go there, including Russian and Mennonites, our people, together with their spiritual leaders, would participate in the Nazi Party morning celebration, which is a pagan activity on one Sunday per month. Its purpose was to awaken and kindle forever anew the forces of instinct, of emotion, and of the soul, which are vital for the strength of existence and the bearing of our people and race for all times. How anybody could sink to pagan activities, I can't explain that. This is a page from a book called entitled Heidegger and the Will, and this is just a break-in, but I need to talk about this a little bit. In such passages, Heidegger calls on students and others to wholly submit to the will of Hitler, who is said to embody the will of the German people. His call demands a referral of one's will, offering it up in the service of a greater will. The individual is called upon to authentically will by sacrificing his or her will to the one great will of the state, a will that is unified in the will of its fascist leader, Adolf Hitler. In these statements from Heidegger's political speeches, we find a call not to simply abandon one's will, but to actively defer it to the towering will of the Führer. In other words, to make this practical, it's a call for every one of you and I in this room to not even have our own will, but to choose to will the very same will that Adolf Hitler had. That is wicked. At one time, both Jews and Mennonites were welcomed by the German princes who needed their tax money. Both groups aroused popular resentment and persecution because of their economic prosperity. Eventually, German political correctness showcased the prosperous Mennonites for their honesty and industry, while declaring that Jewish prosperity undermined German values. So previously, Mennonites and Jews were kind of together on the same level. But because Jews were the diseased people, they were put down and the Mennonites were left up. There was an old saying, you have to get up pretty early to hoodwink a Jew. But if you want to bamboozle a Mennonite, you can't even go to bed the night before. That gives you a little idea of the kind of reputation that these people had. Said of the German Mennonites in the 1930s, This German ethnic mania transformed the public profile of Mennonites. The one-time pesky sect now epitomized the Germanness with its steadfast adherence to thrift, sobriety, piety, honesty, and industry. Perhaps most significant was the Mennonite preservation of racial purity. No other German free church was lauded with such praise. German Mennonites bask in this praise. Let me unpack that just a little bit. You remember the other night when we talked about the Prussian Mennonites, that the government tolerated them to be there. They were good farmers. They created tax revenues. They raised money. But they were strictly informed, you may not evangelize your neighbors. You may not baptize any of your neighbors into your church. In fact, if one of you marries somebody outside the church, the children of that marriage may not even be baptized into your church. Well, parents want their children to join their church, so they didn't marry outside the church. And if by marrying inside the church constantly, the Mennonites in Prussia actually created the kind of people that Hitler wanted. They were the Aryans, the perfect Aryans. And now the German Nazi Party is holding up the Mennonites. See, this is what we're looking for. And these people have been doing it for years. They already know how to do this. And the Mennonites just... Now think about that. At the very same time this is happening, the Jews, who used to be at their same level, is put down. Adolf Hitler spoke of Germany as a body, with himself as the doctor. He wanted to make Germany healthy by eliminating diseased, unhealthy parts of the body. Early on, this meant killing the disabled. But because the Nazis also believed that Jews possessed bad genes, they too became portrayed by public health experts and scientists as a threat to racial purity and a healthy nation. That's why you've got to get rid of Jews. And for Nazis, this included handicapped people. On the front cover of this book is Heinrich Himmler talking to a Mennonite doctor right here. This Mennonite doctor killed handicapped people in accordance with Nazi ideology. You get rid of the people who aren't useful. After the war, this Mennonite doctor was executed for his participation in Nazi war crimes. Heinrich Himmler himself says this: anti-Semitism is exactly the same thing as delousing. Getting rid of lice is not a matter of ideology, it's a matter of cleanliness. In just the same way, anti-Semitism for us has not been a question of ideology, but a matter of cleanliness. Hitler required every German family to document its lineage back 5 generations and have the family records notarized. Genealogical associations archived and cataloged large volumes of Mennonite ancestral information for determining who to count as Jewish versus Aryan. As a means of ensuring the collective Aryanness of Germany's Mennonite community, genealogical research was extremely effective. Individual members obligated to fill out racial passports were often able to do so with the help of church archivists or other local genealogists. At least one congregation met to fill out race forms as an official church activity. One participant said, "Until now, a Mennonite was considered Aryan without question. A single case would ruin our reputation." So when I'm looking at you folks here, I am looking at a pure people. You are unspoiled. You are Aryan. And this comes from the Mennonite Quarterly Review. This is what the Nazis were looking for. If you're a man, you look like that. This Jacob Peters is one of my co-workers in Texas. He's the pastor of my local congregation. He looks like this man right here. I don't know if you recognize similarities in these faces or not. if that looks like you people or not. But this is, okay, so on the female side, this is what it looks like. These are the desirables. And here's another. These racial scientists considered Mennonites to be unusually pure specimens of Aryanism. These three women lived in or near Danzig in 1931. They were integrated into racial studies before Hitler's rise to power. Do they look like people you might know? Both males and females were prone to light hair, eyes, and skin. Of all Aryans, Mennonites were the tallest outside of Scandinavia. On the psychological side, Mennonites demonstrated simplicity, orderliness, diligence, integrity, detachment, stamina, but also stubbornness, insularity, and severity. Dutch Mennonites belonged to the Frisian tribe, the oldest and noblest of all Germanic groups, whose racial character could be traced back for millennia. And I don't know enough about, I just learned this grandma online that our brother was just talking about. I just discovered it tonight. I did not know it even existed. I'm just thinking, would the stuff that they collected back then also be available today? It's very possible. Anyway, Mennonites, directly because of their Mennonite character, have been phenomenally productive, whether as pioneers of agriculture, as industrialists, as businessmen, or as tradespeople. And the Nazis knew that, and that's why they valued Mennonites. The German Mennonites engaged in anti-Semitic behavior. Remember the people, the Jews, who were equal to them at one time, who were put down? Now the Mennonites are also willing to speak against these people. They engaged in anti-Semitic communication, both verbally and in print. They noted that Jews were part of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia and profited financially from World War I. They agreed that violence should not be used against Jews, but the legal restrictions were proper. This attitude was all the Nazis really needed to implement their final solution. So do you know what the final solution is? When someone tell me what the final solution is. Kill them all. You couldn't shoot them fast enough. You had to have mass gassings. If you go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., they have a model there of the gas chambers. The German Mennonites would be passive and silent as the Holocaust happened in their midst. In contrast, the Quakers corporately and individually refused to be passive and silent, actively aiding the Jews where and when they could. Many Mennonite survivors of the Stalinist, terror, and anti-Kulak and deportation campaigns, we talked about that yesterday, expressed virulent hatred for both Jews and communists as equivalent equals. Mennonites generally resented, envied, and despised Jews because so many of them seemed to have been found in the ranks of the Soviet secret police and the Communist Party cadre, as well as among the supervisors and managers of collective farms and of local government agencies. So we have the question, why have the Jews been mistreated throughout history? Remember in the story of Esther, Haman was going to try one of these, get rid of all the Jews, and God intervened. But ever since Christ was here, we have Jewish pogroms who just happen every so often. An active campaign to kill Jews. Why has that happened? Well, there's several reasons. They have been above average in intelligence. They're really, really smart. And they are very, very productive. Thomas Sowell says the way they could be dealt with is to get them to fail. But the Jews don't fail. They're a little bit like Mennonites. They just don't fail. And so people have been envious of them. And people have been envious of your people. If you have been in Mexico, and I probably in Bolivia, you have some stories about this. Anybody who succeeds is envied by the people who don't succeed. And this is what invites revolution. And this eventually, I guess, contributed to the communist revolution in Russia. But Dennis Prager says he thinks there's another reason why people hate Jews so much throughout history. He says the Jews have always represented the moral law, the Ten Commandments. And people who are trying to ignore God and forget God, every time you bump into a Jew, you're reminded of God. And so the best way, throughout history in the Old Testament, the best way to deal with uncomfortable situations like this is get rid of the messenger. Think about the prophets. Think about what they did to Jesus. Just get rid of the messenger. And so this was the answer. Just get rid of the Jews. So you don't have to be reminded of these things. But think about some of the prominent Jews throughout history. Albert Einstein was a Jew. Karl Marx, the inventor of communism, was a Jew. Henry Kissinger was U.S. Secretary of State. He was a Jew. Sigmund Freud, who came up with the psychoanalysis that's basically being debunked today, was a Jew. Jonas Salk, who developed the polio vaccine, was a Jew. Mayer Rothschild, financier, was a Jew. Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law, is a Jew. And we could go on and on. Prominent people. And by the way, have you noticed, I don't know if this is as much in Canada as it is in the U.S., but anti-Semitism is now rising again. Is that true in Canada? Okay. The Nazis used the cross. Now think about the swastika. It's a broken cross. Every one of the arms is broken. So the Nazis used this broken cross and the Bible as they did their work. And the Jews ended up crushed and dehumanized and all the more alienated from the gospel because the symbols of redemption were used by their abusers so that drowning people abused by the life preserver turned to the safer worlds of agnosticism, atheism, or vague, pluralistic, feel-good spiritualism, which is the position of most Jews today. Jews will say, there could not have been a God in heaven who allowed the Holocaust to happen. So they became atheistic. And the state of Israel today is largely atheist. There's these Orthodox Jews over there, but they're by far not the majority. I think it's fair to say that either the state of Israel is Reformed Jewish or atheist. Probably the only person who had any chance of hampering Hitler was the Pope, who had the ear of 40 million German Catholics, but he barely said a word. When German forces occupied Rome, he opened his sanctuaries to give refuge to many thousands of non-Aryans. But he was committed to neutrality in his search for peace and feared provoking Hitler, so he opened not his mouth. The most harshly persecuted Christian group in Nazi Germany was the Jehovah's Witnesses. Of a population of 20,000, about half spent some time in concentration camps. At least 1,400 died in the camps, and about 250 were executed for refusing to bear arms. We talked about this last night with the anti-Kulak campaign. 1/3 of all Russian Mennonites were arrested and disappeared. The watching German Mennonites said, the recently resurrected German Reich has become a protective bulwark against Bolshevik assault. We have remained spared from the horrors suffered by our comrades that share our faith in our racial stock in the Soviet Union. Thank God for Adolf Hitler. Because Stalin had this: men make problems. Death is a solution to all problems. No man, no problem. In 1937, Hitler ordered all German children into the government schools. He said, "The youth of today is ever the people of tomorrow. For this reason, we have set before ourselves the task of inoculating our youth with the spirit of this community at a very early age, at an age when human beings are still unperverted and are therefore unspoiled. This Reich stands and is building itself up for the future upon its youth. And this new Reich will give its youth to no one, but will itself take youth and give to youth its own education and its own upbringing." Some more quotes from Hitler. "He alone who owns the youth gains the future." True. How fortunate for leaders that men do not think. Ignorance is a great way to control people. It's always more difficult to fight against faith than against knowledge. Make the lie big, make it simple, keep saying it, and eventually they will believe it. Hitler also said, "My educational method is hard. The weak must be chiseled away. In my order castles, young people who will grow up who will frighten the world. I want a violent, arrogant, unafraid, cruel youth who must be able to suffer pain. Nothing weak or tender must be in them. Their eyes must bespeak once again the free, magnificent beast of prey. I want my young people strong and beautiful. I shall train them in all kinds of athletics, for I want youth that are athletic. That is first and foremost. Thus I will face the pure and noble raw material. Thus I can create the new. I do not want an intellectual education. With knowledge, I will spoil the young. I would vastly prefer them to learn only what they absorb voluntarily as they follow their play instinct. They shall learn to overcome the fear of death through the most arduous tests. This is the historic age of heroic youth." And so, we have the Hitler Youth. At first, when you turned 14, you could join the Hitler Youth as a boy. Eventually, it became mandatory for all German teenage men, young men, to join. Had to be a part of Hitler Youth. Well, that's the boys. And here's the girls. They're called German maidens. We're all focused on building up this German nation. It's going to last 1,000 years. And so Himmler, when he went over to Russia to visit the German Mennonites over there, this is a picture in a Mennonite gathering. Now, those girls are not wearing head coverings, by the way. Those are nurses' caps. But they are admiring him, and he is admiring them. Himmler said, "I was in Ukraine, and I looked the people over. Your Mennonites were the best," he told Benjamin Monroe. The Nazis loved Ukrainian Mennonites, but they're not in Germany. They're planning for them to go to Warthenland, but these are prized people. So much so that Joseph Goebbels, minister of propaganda, actually created a movie targeting Mennonites. I saw this thing. It about makes the hair stand up in the back of your head. It's a propaganda piece to get Mennonites to forget their non-resistance. It was a movie targeted at Mennonites. It was released in 1941. You can still see it to this day. Well, lest I forget it, Joseph Goebbels also created one of the most effective propaganda pieces it's called The Eternal Jew. And you can now buy it. I don't know about Canada, but you can get it in the U.S. In France, it's still outlawed. Can't see it. I don't know about Canada. But I'm warning you, if you look at that film, you might not like Jews till it's finished. It's so effective because Jews are portrayed as rats and cockroaches. John F. Kennedy said, "The great enemy of the truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, dishonest, but the myth. Persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic. But if people don't think, they just believe the lie." In 1937, Eberhard Arnold's German Hutterite community was forcibly dissolved and its members deported from Germany. Why? They raised their voice against what was happening. And Hitler says, "Get out." So they went out. They went first to England, and then they went to Paraguay. To distance themselves from the Hutterites, the German Mennonites wrote, quote, "The Hutterites belong neither to German Mennonite churches nor to any other organization within our Free German Mennonite Church." We are distant from these people. In 1938, official church president Friedrich Werner gave orders that on Adolf Hitler's 49th birthday in April, all Protestant pastors must swear an oath of allegiance to the Führer, leader, and Reich Chancellor, which was Hitler's two titles. Werner's decree included the words, "Anyone who refuses to take the oath is to be dismissed." This was bedrock Anabaptist theology, not to do this. But once again, it's gone. And so the German Christians took the oath immediately with joyful hearts and in obedience to inner command. And the German Mennonites joined the Protestant flow and once again said, "Yes, sir," and took the oath of loyalty to Adolf Hitler. How many of you know who Dietrich Bonhoeffer is? I'm going to see your raise of hands. Okay, so Dietrich Bonhoeffer was one of a few in Germany who understood what was going on. He led the confessing church. And he tried to go around and talk to church leaders and help them understand what was going on. Because these confessing church pastors felt that they had been ordered to break their ordination vow by taking this oath. The text that accompanied the oath described it as more than a recognition of duty to be subject to the governing authorities. It meant being in the most intimate solidarity with the Third Reich and with the man who created that community and embodies it. But as he and his companions traveled from one pastor's meeting to another to persuade ministers not to take the oath, they had little success with their arguments. And the whole matter became one of the most shameful defeats of the confessing church. And I've got to say, we would differ from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He felt that it was his moral duty to plant a bomb and kill Hitler. And so he put a suitcase at a table where Hitler was going to sit. And it was supposed to go off at a certain time. But right before it went off, Hitler got up and moved. And the bomb went off, killed some people, wounded Hitler somewhat, but it made Hitler roaring mad. And he went out and tried to find who did all this. And eventually, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was apprehended as a person who was part of this conspiracy to get rid of him. 2 weeks before the end of World War II, they actually executed Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Here's this oath. If you joined the army, and Mennonite boys did, they were required to swear this: "I swear by God this sacred oath that I will render unconditional obedience to Adolf Hitler, the Führer of the German Reich, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, and that I shall at all times be prepared as a brave soldier to give my life for this oath." Official German Mennonite publications supported the Third Reich, praised the Nazi armies, rejoiced in their victories, and called for Mennonites to lay down their lives for their friends. With the 1939 reunion of Danzig with Germany, the Prussian Mennonites praised the act as nothing short of the merciful will of God. But in a few short years, the victories crumbled into ashes and bitter tears, and this is what Danzig looked like in 1945. until it ceased publication in 1841. The German Mennonite periodical, blah, 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 continued to laud Hitler and his policies, as well as provide theological and biblical reasons for supporting them. Adolf Hitler said in 41, and this is during the war, "I can't break the church over my knee. It has to be left to rot like a gangrenous limb. But the healthy youth belong to us." Heinrich Himmler said, "We shall not rest until we have rooted out Christianity." When the Nazis permitted German Mennonites freedom to exist as a church only if they abandoned all abandoned all critical public commentary, they had no anchor, and so once again they said, "Yes, sir. Now we will not even criticize anything." So that not one able-bodied Mennonite man in draft age in all of Germany refused conscription. Some even joined the notorious SS. And this man, his name is Heinrich Wiens. I will just tell you his story. To his credit, he gave up his Mennonite membership the year before he did this. But he joined and made himself available to run the gas trucks, who would go out to a Polish village, and they would say, "All right, you Jews here, you have 1 week to sign up. And then a week from now, you need to have your belongings with you, and you are going to be transported to a new place." So, next week, the trucks would show up, the Jews would get on, and they would be taken out to a nearby field. And they had these gas trucks, and he would tell the first 25, "Take your clothes off, first 25, and get in this truck." Got your clothes off, got in the truck, closed the door, drove around the field, turned the gas on till they're all dead, come back to the living Jews that are still standing there, open the doors, and tell the living Jews, "All right, pull these dead bodies out, throw them in there. Next 25, clothes off, into the truck." What could they do? Got their clothes off, got into the truck. Went around the field, turned the gas on until they're all dead. Come back, get the living, pull them off, and do that until all the Jews are killed. And then after those are killed, you go to the next village and do that to them. Now I have a question for you. Why did they tell the Jews to take their clothes off? It's a simple answer. They're efficient. They're going to reuse those clothes. So it's a whole lot easier for living people to take their clothes off than it is to get busy with dead people and take their clothes off. So this is after the war. That's one of those trucks, and the people are looking at it. It's parked. You can see it's not used anymore, but that's what it looked like. And that was a Mennonite. I have a book at my house called 12 Ordinary Men. 12 ordinary policemen. This is before they started using all these gas trucks. But you got to kill Jews. And so the way they did, and I got to be careful here, I don't say too much. I'm not sure if I should even start the story. Maybe I better stop. If you want to know the rest of that story, you come and talk to me. The book, 12 Ordinary Men, it's like I couldn't even read the rest of the book. How you can get human beings, ordinary human beings, to do the stuff that's in that book is beyond me. So if you go to these Holocaust museums, there are certain places in the museum where there's a concrete wall. If you're tall enough, you can look over the wall and you look down and you see some of this terrible stuff. And it's to protect. I had a student that I went with. She would look. She saw enough. She couldn't believe that human beings do things like this. But some people had some secret movie cameras where they filmed Jews being shot. And some people can't handle that. And I respect that. I have to be careful what I say in a public place like this. While the public faces of German Mennonites consistently supported the Nazi regime, this was not a result of cold calculation. Neither did it take place in the absence of soul searching. Nevertheless, their faith failed to provide a perspective that transcended the trappings of their culture and of their era. Would you hand me this book right here, A Place for Ruth? Thank you. I gave this presentation, a shortened version of it, in Grantsville, Maryland, and the people there said, you need to go talk with Ruth Reimer. And so this book has been written about Ruth Reimer. She is now Ruth Yoder. You can buy it from CLP. This is her parents. Her father was an SS man. Her mother took care of the family. And the grandma here, in the midst of this story, just disappeared forever. But this mother, when the Germans, when the Soviet army was coming into East Prussia and starting to take over, this lady, with her children, including Ruth. Ruth is this girl right here. Right here. She fled. No husband and no grandma. When she got up to the water at the Baltic Sea, she either wanted the whole family to live or the whole family to die together. So they had to get on barges to get over to Denmark. And when she got on this barge, barges are known for rocking like this. And she was afraid some of her children would fall off. So she put a sheet around herself and all her children and back to herself again so that they would all live or die. The barge beside them hit a mine and was all blown up. But lo and behold, she and the children actually went to Denmark. And this is the story of that. And when the war was over, the father actually came home. Ruth told me herself, she says, I don't think my father was a Christian, but he's a Mennonite. This is a Mennonite family. You can read the rest of it here. The biggest flaw of the Mennonites was not any immediate error. Instead, it was the natural consequence of years of gradual theological adaptations and compromises to better fit within the German community. The consequences for the German Mennonites of abandoning their New Testament principles was complicity with the Nazi regime and being collaborators in the Jewish Holocaust. Now get that. They were collaborators in the Jewish Holocaust. If you go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., they have a map where all the concentration camps were listed. And one of those concentration camps was at Stutthof, which is up near Danzig. And a Mennonite man, you can see the picture of him in one of these books up here, ran a concentration camp. He used starving Jewish laborers to run his camp as slaves. Now here's coming to the end of the story. When Ruth's parents, mother, and the children left, because the Russian soldiers were chasing the Nazis east toward the end of the war. In early 1945, the Mennonites of former West Prussia were the hapless victims of the advancing Russian army. A general fear of being caught by the invaders led many to flee to the west. Those who remained or waited too long to escape, usually the sick, the young, and the elderly, suffered mightily at the hands of the Russian army. Pause. Last night, I showed you a picture of those people who were shot. But they didn't only shoot people. When the Soviet soldiers came in, they raped every woman they could find. And then followed starvation, bodily injury, torture, deportation to Russia. They were the horrific events of those times for the people who did not flee. But Ruth's mother fled and missed it, but grandma didn't, and she was somehow killed. Nobody knows the rest of her story. Congregations and families were torn apart. Most would never see their homeland again. The vibrant communities of Mennonites in West Prussia were utterly destroyed. And yesterday I showed you some pictures of that. Today, there's cemeteries there. But the place that was the most heavily populated Mennonite community in the world is now no more. Gone. Rather than having their insecure fears of being expelled from Germany by the Nazis realized, the Prussian Mennonites found a much worse fate at the hands of the advancing Soviet army. And by summer 1945, the Prussian Mennonites lost their 400-year home in the region. And here's a picture I showed you yesterday. Or didn't I? Did I show you this? Okay. And here's another one. Did I show you this yesterday? This is Prussia. The dead people are there. After the Nazi atrocities became fully known to the public in 1945, the Mennonites found themselves battling the demon of their own creation in the stark realization of having compromised their fundamental tenets of faith by their allegiance with one of the most evil regimes in human history. Now what are they going to do? Their error is exposed to the whole world. What are they going to do? It took 30 years before writings addressing the Nazi past came to be written by the German Mennonites. For many, this was a very painful process, and I have more to say about that shortly. But in the meantime, I want you to see with your own eyes, and this is in this book, but I want to show you this. One of these Nazi concentration camps, Stutthof, was located in the midst of Mennonite farmhouses. And the inhabitants of the area often saw starving prisoners in their striped dress on their way to the places of their forced labor. Right there it is. I used to think, who would ever, if you'd ever write a book about this stuff, it would never be bought. It's so awful. But I found out since I started giving this that there are now two books. It's the Chosen Nation book and the European Mennonites and the Holocaust. And this second book, European Mennonites and the Holocaust, you can buy and purchase in the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And then we have things like this. This is a church in Paraguay. The picture above that pulpit is a picture of Adolf Hitler in church. The banner up above in German, translated, it would say, communal benefit before personal benefit. Believe and know that to begin our communal reconstruction spells our children's future. So we ask these questions. How did this happen? Why did the German Mennonites enthusiastically support Adolf Hitler? Well, there's at least 6 things to think about. He provided religious direction. He improved the farming economy. He created a strong central government. He worked to destroy communism. He offered hope to a discouraged Germany. And he offered a comprehensive solution to the German problems. In other words, I have a kingdom that if you support, it will fix the world. We look back at that time in history and are perplexed. Couldn't the German people understand what was happening? Didn't a constant diet of slanted media raise any concerns? Incredibly, few were aware of how their views and values were being shaped because it was accomplished through entertainment. They laughed together at the comedies, cried together through emotional scenes, and rejoiced together when German heroes conquered. The movies were the talk on the street the next day. They couldn't wait for the next new film. But unknown to the public, they were allowing media to change their views, their values, and the very core of who they were. Does that sound familiar? So, in 1995, this is the first official recognition The National Coalition of German Mennonites published this, quote, "Most Mennonites in Germany gave in to the temptations of Nazism and sacrificed the peace witness. Very often, they valued their commitment to the state higher than their duties to Mennonite brothers and sisters in the Netherlands and France. Nearly all Mennonites remained silent in the face of Nazi crimes against Jews and others. We can only plead for forgiveness with the words of the Lord's Prayer." At least they said that. This is not, I have not said anything at all. If you have German Mennonites, and for a while they were fighting Dutch and French Mennonites, and so you have Mennonite fighting Mennonite in the war as well. And there's a story, somebody told me, I don't know where it was, of a French Mennonite guarding a German Mennonite in prison. This is the January or July 2011 Mennonite, the magazine, and it's an official recognition. I won't take time to read it. But this is hard to believe. Said of former Mennonite Nazis in 2001, that is just 24 years ago, the majority have not recognized the need for repentance of any kind. Now, most of these people have died off today, but they have never come to terms with what they did. The Mennonite open-mindedness toward the Third Reich was possible when the Mennonites left the early separation and integrated into a Protestant society. When they lost the two-kingdom doctrine, this was the result. And what's so surprising is that they didn't learn from their own history. This pattern of refusing the two-kingdom doctrine has not changed since 1945. And that's why the unsettler who came from Russia find it difficult to fellowship with German Mennonites. Why did the German Mennonites become Nazis? They were the heirs of groups who, after long centuries of being disadvantaged, had now made tremendous gains and had flourished quickly after adapting to German society. They had long since lost any connection to the critical stance of the first Anabaptists, and their understanding of their own history was revisionist. They adopted the predominant Protestant theology of Lutheranism, according to which the head of state is acting as God's instrument through which there was also some dissent. In general, however, German Mennonites of this time separated their personal religious beliefs from their political opinions, and that's called dualism. And we can't go there right now. But this is why Anabaptism came into existence, because they realized that dualism was wrong, that wholeness and oneness is God's plan. Simon Wiesenthal said this. He was known as the Nazi hunter after World War II. There is no denying that Hitler and Stalin are alive today. They are waiting for us to forget, because that's what makes it possible for the resurrection of these monsters. Now, of course, that's allegorical. I'm telling you, this is happening right now before our eyes. These monsters are rising again. Non-cooperation with evil is every bit a moral obligation as cooperation with good. Evil prospers when good men do nothing about it. Oh God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home. This, brothers and sisters and friends, is our only way forward, with the two-kingdom doctrine firmly in place. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for sharing that, Brother Chester. Very sobering of what has happened in the past. May we learn from that and and make wise decisions. May we use that to look forward and to make sure we don't repeat that. A statement he has, I think, made a couple times: if we don't know history, we're condemned to repeat it. Not just maybe or likely, but we will repeat it if we don't learn from this. So let us take that to heart and make sure we move forward in the right direction. Thanks again, each one that has come out. We will dismiss at this time, but you are free and welcome to stay and visit and have some coffee and fellowship. Thanks again for coming.